Netanyahu assassinates Palestinian journalists, the West Coast is melting ice, and we expose an insane web of billionaires, government surveillance programs, comedian podcasters, and a plot to end democracy. You don't want to miss this episode. My name's Jovan Bradley, and this is The Weekly Dump. Welcome to The Weekly Dump, your number 2 source for number 1 news. It is Sunday, September 7th, and we are back here in Studio B to bring you more of what you crave and that sweet, sweet leftist indoctrination. Okay? Now, I am your host, Jovan Bradley. I'm joined in the studio, as always, by Steve, producer Steve. You all know him. You all love him. And technical director Chris, you know him, you love him. They are joining me in the booth today as we go ahead and give you the news. If you are watching the show here on YouTube, you're only getting like a portion if you're watching it on my personal YouTube page. If you want to get the whole show, and that means you see everything, you need to head on over to Red Mirror Media's YouTube page. That's Red Mirror Media, youtube.com/@ channel Red Mirror Media. I don't know if that's how you do YouTube URLs, but that's how I'm going to tell you to do the YouTube URL. Now, because it's been a while, we are going to skip the debate discussion portion of the show this week. We are just going to be focusing on the news because there's actually some major things that we want to talk to you guys about. We will have discussions and debates brought back next week. For this week, that's all I'm saying. Now, if you're sitting here and you're like, well, where's the Twitch stream? Sorry, guys. I told you there was going to be no more Twitch streams of the Weekly Dump. They're a YouTube exclusive show. Come to YouTube. Okay? Now, before we dive super far into it, just a reminder about everything going on here on the show. You can like us, you can follow us, you can subscribe, you can do that beautiful stuff. And the biggest thing I want people to remember, okay, is we do have a Patreon. Now, the Patreon's going to get a bit of a facelift coming here soon. We're going to see a bit of a facelift. But just be aware, patreon.com. I'm pretty sure it's like /Red Mirror Media, but find it in our link tree in our bio. You can come in and you can subscribe to us, okay? Just so everybody's aware. All right. Now, because we haven't done news for a while, I say it's time we turn our focus away from Trump and his clownery and buffoonery. So instead of focusing on Trump, we're going to cover other important topics. Okay. Now, first, we want to give you a bit of an update on Alligator Alcatraz. Now, on our July 20th show, we reported to you guys that there were multiple lawsuits being levied against Alligator Alcatraz from environmental groups and indigenous tribes. We were happy to hear that on Thursday, August 24th, U.S. District Judge Kathleen Williams, who serves in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida, issued a preliminary injunction, effectively ordering that this literal concentration camp is to be shut down within 60 days. Now, here are some key points from this 82-page ruling. First, they must stop transferring in new people in immigration custody immediately. Second, they must transfer out all people in immigration custody and remove much of the added construction like asphalt, generators, and wastewater infrastructure within 60 days. And, just for safe measures, the judge made it clear that people in custody must be moved out before the infrastructure is removed. Now, environmental groups and the Muckasuki tribe successfully argued that this facility, 1, violates environmental law. Duh. 2, had an inadequate environmental review. Double duh. And 3, violates Everglades protections. Triple home run, and obviously. But unfortunately, on September 4th, in a 2-1 ruling by a panel of judges, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit will effectively allow Alligator Alcatraz to stay open. Now, what does this mean? Well, the fight itself isn't over. The lawsuits still stand and will proceed as planned. But the concentration camp will have to remain open and operational during the process. And another update. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who we talked about on the show previously multiple times, has finally been released from custody and is back in his Maryland home with his family. Now, this isn't a time to celebrate because the United States government is still trying very hard to ship Kilmar Abrego Garcia off. Now, last time I checked, they wanted to send him to Uganda. They are trying everything in their power, but right now judges are blocking his deportation, and that's sort of where we're at the moment. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, hope to hope, but we're going to find out more about this later on as this story develops. Now, we need to talk about Gaza, and we need to talk about it right now, because the mainstream media coverage is missing some crucial context that you deserve to understand. This is what's been happening in the last couple of weeks, so be warned. This is serious stuff, so if at any point you need a break during the segment, pause the stream, get up, and do literally anything else. Me personally, I started playing Pokemon Go again. Maybe that's, maybe you do that. But just be prepared, okay? Now, Israel is targeting journalists, and we know why. Something happened on August 11th, and it should, honestly, terrify anyone who cares about press freedom. Israeli airstrikes killed 4 Al Jazeera journalists, including correspondent Anas al-Sharif. Israel's justification? They claim al-Sharif was, quote, leading a Hamas cell. Al Jazeera's director of news, Salah Nem, isn't buying it. And I'm sorry if I mispronounce these names, I apologize. I did spend a lot of time trying to learn them phonetically, but y'all know how my brain works. Everyone knows what this really was. It was a targeted assassination designed to silence independent reporting. Or as they put it, Netanyahu is trying to, quote, eliminate any eyewitness to what's really happening in Gaza City. Anas knew this would happen and had a statement released upon his assassination. We're going to take a listen to the statement in its entirety.
This is my will and final message. If these words reach you, know that Israel has succeeded in killing me and silencing my voice. First, peace be upon you, and God's mercy and blessings. God knows I gave every effort and all my strength to be a support and a voice for my people, ever since I opened my eyes to life in the alleys and streets of the Jabalia refugee camp. My hope was that God would extend my life so I could return with my family and loved ones to our original town of occupied Ascalon. But God's will came first, and His decree is final. I have lived through pain in all its details, tasted suffering and loss many times, yet I never once hesitated to convey the truth as it is, without distortion or falsification, so that God may bear witness against those who stayed silent, those who accepted our killing, those who choked our breath, and whose hearts were unmoved by the scattered remains of our children and women, doing nothing to stop the massacre that our people have faced for more than a year and a half. I entrust you with Palestine, the jewel in the crown of the Muslim world, the heartbeat of every free person in this world. I entrust you with its people, with its wronged and innocent children who have never had the time to dream or live in safety and peace. Their pure bodies were crushed under thousands of tons of Israeli bombs and missiles, torn apart and scattered across the walls. I urge you not to let chains silence you, nor borders restrain you. Be bridges toward the liberation of the land and its people, until the sun of dignity and freedom rises over our stolen homeland. I entrust you to take care of my family. I entrust you with my beloved daughter Sham, the light of my eyes, whom I never got the chance to watch grow up as I had dreamed. I entrust you with my dear son Salah, whom I wished to support and accompany through life until he grew strong enough to carry my burden and continue the mission. I entrust you with my beloved mother, whose blessed prayers brought me to where I am, whose prayers were my fortress, and whose light guided my path. I pray that God grants her strength and rewards her on my behalf with the best rewards. I also entrust you with my lifelong companion, my beloved wife Salah, from whom the war separated me for many long days and months. Yet she remained faithful to our bond, steadfast as the trunk of an olive tree that does not bend, patient, trusting in God, and carrying the responsibility in my absence with all her strength and faith. I urge you to stand by them, to be their support after God Almighty. If I die steadfast upon my principles. I testify before God that I am content with his decree, certain of meeting him, and assured that what is with God is better and everlasting. O God, forgive my past and future sins, and make my blood a light that illuminates the path of freedom for my people and my family. Forgive me if I have fallen short, and pray for me with mercy, for I kept my promise and never changed or betrayed it. Do not forget Gaza, and do not forget me in your sincere prayers for forgiveness and acceptance.
Now, this isn't happening in a vacuum. When you systematically target journalists, you're not just committing war crimes, you're trying to control the narrative. And that should set off alarm bells for anyone who values truth and accountability. Now, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is demanding an independent and impartial investigation because he knows what we all know. Journalists must be protected if we want any hope of understanding what's really happening on the ground. France, typically a reliable ally, condemned Israel's war expansion plans, quote, in the strongest terms, saying they would, quote, constitute further serious violations of international law. French President Emmanuel Macron is now calling for UN peacekeepers in Gaza, declaring this war must end now with a permanent ceasefire. Now, this next update is absolutely heartbreaking. I really don't understand how anyone can support this, but Israel is literally starving children in the Gaza region. UNICEF, an agency of the United Nations that focuses on protecting children's rights and providing aid where needed, reported that nearly 12,000 children were identified as acutely malnourished in July alone. Think about that. 12,000 children starving in a single month. On August 17th, at least 18 Palestinians were killed by Israeli strikes and gunfire, including 7 people who were literally just trying to get food aid. Amnesty International, a global organization focused on protecting human rights, is accusing Israel of implementing a deliberate policy of starvation in Gaza. Their report states that Israel is carrying out a deliberate campaign of starvation in the occupied Gaza Strip, systematically destroying the health, well-being, and social fabric of Palestinian life. When human rights organizations use the word deliberate, that's not hyperbole. That's a legal determination with serious implications under international law. What's happening on the ground is horrifying. Even worse is watching the misinformation and propaganda campaign running out of Israel to paint the picture that they are just doing all they can to provide aid to the people in Gaza while simultaneously bombing it into oblivion. We often hear, quote, we still have 50 hostages whose lives hang in the balance, as the reason for the continuation of the genocide in Gaza. How many times have we heard, oh, Hamas just needs to give back the hostages and the war will end. If Hamas just gives back the hostages, we can have peace. This is all on Hamas for holding those hostages. You guys are smart. You know that's bullshit. And we have enough evidence to make the prosecutors in the OJ case jealous. Now, Yaniv Zangokar, which if I pronounced that wrong, I apologize so heavily, the mother of hostage Matan Zangokar, revealed something that we've seen Netanyahu do before. About a month ago, we were closer than ever to signing a deal, she said. But she's accusing Netanyahu of making, quote, political considerations and deciding to blow it up. Let that sink in. The families of hostages, the very people whose loved ones' lives are at stake, are saying their own government prioritized politics over rescue efforts. The White House says they're continuing to discuss a truce proposal that Hamas reportedly accepted. But if Yaniv is right, the real obstacle is clearly not Hamas. It's Netanyahu. And he continues to make completely evil decisions. In fact, Netanyahu has delivered an ultimate death blow to Palestinian statehood. On August 21st, Israel approved the P21E1 settlement project. 3,500 new housing units that will literally cut the West Bank in half, making a contagious Palestinian state impossible. Sorry, a contiguous Palestinian state impossible. I can't read today. This is the exact same strategy of divide and conquer they did with Gaza. This plan sat frozen for 20 years because every previous U.S. administration knew it was the red line. But with Trump back and his ambassador saying the two-state solution isn't a priority, Netanyahu saw his opening. Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich was gleeful, saying the Palestinian state is being erased from the table not with slogans, but with actions. Over 20 countries condemn it as illegal, but international law means nothing to fascists. And, just as an aside, if you're just listening in or watching us on Vertical, you may not be able to see this, but if you're with us on the main channel, I want you to look at the podium he's standing behind. That's the map of Greater Israel. That is all the land they feel comfortable admitting is what they want to ethnically cleanse to expand their settler colonial state. This isn't annexation. Okay? It's not annexation in name, it's annexation in reality. And it's happening right now. On August 25th, Israeli forces conducted a devastating double-tap attack on Nasser Hospital and Khan Yunis, Gaza, killing 5 journalists, among at least 22 people total. At least 20 died, including 4 health workers and 5 journalists. The journalists were using the hospital's 4th-floor staircase as a vantage point to document Israeli military operations when the first strike occurred, followed by a second strike that killed those who rushed to help, including the other journalists. The 5 journalists were named Ahmad Abu Aziz, Muhammad Salama, Hussam al-Masri, Mariam Abu Daka, and Moaz Abu Taha. And if I said those wrong, again, thoroughly apologize. The killing of 5 more Palestinian journalists in Gaza by Israeli forces, bringing the total killed overall to 247 since the war began. That should shock the world into action, as the UN Human Rights Office said in a statement regarding this war crime. But as with the last 22 months, the majority of the world still sits idly by and watches this genocide unfold in real time. Now, I want us to take a quick breather because that's a lot of information about Gaza, okay? Again, just to recap sort of what we were talking about, families of the hostages are saying that Netanyahu is letting hostage negotiation fall apart. Israel is killing journalists on the ground. They're literally starving people. This is a genocide, plain and simple. And I won't argue with anybody that it's not. I won't have that argument. So if you're one of those people that are like, I'm going to argue about this, shove it. Okay? Shove it. Now, if you are enjoying this content, please remember to subscribe to the channel. You can subscribe to my personal channel, but also Red Mirror Media is live. We are there as well. And you can get the full effect, the full screen effect over on Red Mirror Media's YouTube page. Remember us over there. That's where you're going to get like everything happening, okay? We're live there. Come there. All right? Now, everyone's been focused on the horror stories coming out of immigration enforcement. However, organized communities are quietly kicking ICE's ass. And they're doing it with smart strategy, legal expertise, and good old-fashioned community organizing. That's what we're going to talk about next. Now, let me break down what's actually working, because this is a masterclass in effective resistance. Portland, Oregon, isn't just resisting, they're winning. And here's exactly how they're doing it. The Portland Immigration Rights Coalition runs a statewide hotline that's basically turned into ICE's worst nightmare. The moment someone spots enforcement activity, they call it in. Within minutes, lawyers are mobilized, legal petitions are being filed, and the whole enforcement operation gets thrown into chaos. Isa Penna from Innovation Law Lab explained their secret weapon. Quote, if we are able to file a habeas corpus petition in Oregon, we have gotten orders from the judge that the individual cannot be removed out of the state. They're using the courts to trap ICE agents in legal quicksand. But here's the brilliant part. Oregon doesn't have overnight detention facilities. So when activists tie up ICE in court, these thugs often have no choice but to release people because they can't hold them overnight. And it's absolutely devastating to their operations. The results speak for themselves. Immigration arrests dropped significantly in July, and activists are taking credit for it. This isn't just feel-good activism. This is tactical, results-oriented organizing that's actually saving lives. Federal courts are stepping in, and ICE hates it. Here's where things get really interesting from a legal perspective. In Los Angeles, one federal judge looked at ICE's tactics and basically said, this violates the Constitution. Then issued a temporary restraining order to stop them. When the feds tried to appeal, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals told them to take a seat. No. In fact, take several seats. The three-judge panel essentially said, yeah, this enforcement is unconstitutional, and we're not going to help you get around that. Angelica Salas from the Coalition of Humane Immigrant Rights, Los Angeles, gets to the heart of why this matters. Quote, we believe in the courts, and we believe in the Constitution, and we're going to continue to fight in the courts because we have rights, and we're going to affirm those rights in every way possible. But here's the key. These legal victories didn't happen by accident. Community groups spent months systematically documenting enforcement abuses, building the evidence that could convince federal judges to intervene. This is strategic litigation at its finest. Communities have also turned to economic pressure, following ICE raids at a Home Depot on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, where agents hid in a Penske truck and arrested approximately 16 day laborers. LA Civil Rights Group organized a community stoppage on August 12th. Felipe Caceres of Service Employees International Union Local 721 announced the strategy. For 24 hours, we are reclaiming our power to stop the Trump terror. For 24 hours, we are going to boycott companies. We are going to rally, and we are going to support local businesses and street vendors that support our people. The action was part of a broader summer of resistance against federal immigration enforcement, showing how communities are using multiple tactics to fight back. What we're seeing here should give everyone hope, but more importantly, it should provide a roadmap. These communities aren't just resisting, they're winning. Now, I just want to give you guys another reminder, just another hello, hey, hi, how you doing? If you're watching on my YouTube page, Joe Von Bradley, what I want you to do is click on over to Red Mirror Media's YouTube page. You'll get the full version of the show. You guys are missing photos. There are photos right here. You're missing them. You don't see them because you're not watching the full video. So head on over, get used that full views. Get used that full views. All right. Now, we are going to get into our main story here in a second. So I just want everybody to be ready because, oh boy, is this one a doozy. We need to, before we do, just give our flowers to producer Steve for all the research he did in this next story because, oh boy, buckle up, dumperoos, because we are in for a long and wild ride, okay? Now, for our main story today, I want to talk to you about something that's going to sound like an episode of Black Mirror. What if a software engineer, a PayPal billionaire, and a British philosopher walked into an early internet blog comment section, and then they decided to overthrow democracy and ended up controlling the highest levels of government? Well, that isn't a Black Mirror episode. This is the Dark Enlightenment. How a fringe internet ideology took controlling key positions in the American government and purchased tens of thousands of acres of land to start up CEO-led monarchies where you will serve as their perpetual wage slaves. I wish I was joking. I wish this was a bit. Now let's start with our main characters. First up, you have Curtis Yarvin, a software engineer who wrote under the pseudonym Mencius Moldbug. Yes, that is really the name he chose for himself. On purpose. Now, between 2007 and 2014, Yarvin argued on his blog, Unqualified Reservations, that essentially, American democracy is a failed experiment that should be replaced by an accountable monarchy, similar to the governance structure of corporations. Now, we're going to listen to Yarvin literally say, Americans need to get over their dictator phobia.
And finally, you need a CEO, and a national CEO is what's called a dictator. It's the same thing. There's no difference between a CEO and a dictator. If Americans want to change their government, they're going to have to get over their dictator phobia. One way of...
Now, I don't know about you, but I think having a phobia of dictators is actually pretty healthy. That's like saying we need you to get over your being hit by logs that fall off the back of a truck phobia. But unfortunately, I, like millions of Americans, saw Final Destination 2. So I'm never doing that. Now, Yarvin wasn't working alone. Enter Nick Land, a British philosopher who took Yarvin's ideas and wrapped them into a neat pile of academic jargon, coining the term Dark Enlightenment. Now, Land believes democracy inevitably leads to fascism. So we should just skip trying to save democracy and get straight to the corporate authoritarianism part. He was also connected to the LD50 Art Gallery in London, which back in 2017 was criticized for providing a platform for neo-reactionaries and neo-Nazis to post their cringe art. And yes, that's a real piece of art from a real show they did. Look at how they massacred my boy Pepe. So, we've got the blogger and the philosopher, but every supervillain origin story needs a billionaire. Enter Peter Thiel. Yes, that Peter Thiel. PayPal co-founder, Facebook's first outside investor, and the man who wrote in 2009, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible." Yep. Thiel's father, Klaus Thiel, moved Peter and his family from Germany to apartheid South Africa in the 70s, and while there, helped build and operate a uranium mining camp. Now, if I had a nickel for every guy with a white supremacist father that operated an apartheid-era mining facility in South Africa, and grew up to be a psychopathic billionaire, and purchased a place in the United States government, well, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird it happened twice. Now, you might think, okay, some rich guy has weird opinions, so what? Well, here's the thing. Thiel didn't just have opinions. He had money. And he started spreading it around to build a systematic network to implement those ideas. According to leaked emails obtained by BuzzFeed, Yarvin claimed he had been, quote, coaching Thiel, and that Thiel was fully enlightened in the Dark Enlightenment philosophy. And Thiel put his money where his ideology was, and invested directly in Yarvin himself. But to understand why these 3 guys think they need to overthrow democracy, you have to understand their central conspiracy theory, something Curtis Yarvin calls the cathedral. Now, the cathedral isn't a building. It's an invisible network of elite institutions that supposedly controls American society. Universities like Harvard and Stanford, newspapers like the New York Times and Washington Post, government agencies, NGOs, think tanks, all supposedly working together to maintain what he calls progressive orthodoxy. In Yarvin's paranoid worldview, these institutions don't compete or disagree with each other. Instead, they form a secret coordinated mechanism that shapes public opinion and policy. He claims this network has more power than the official government, calling it the real ruling class of America. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because you've heard versions of this conspiracy theory before. The idea that universities, media, and government agencies secretly coordinate to push a liberal agenda. That's basically every Fox News segment for the past 20 years. But here's what makes Yarvin's version different. He doesn't want to reform the cathedral or make it more conservative. He wants to destroy it completely and replace our democratic institutions with something he calls a corporate monarchy. Basically running countries like tech companies with CEOs as kings. Now, Peter Thiel bought into this theory completely. In his mind, democratic institutions aren't just biased against conservatives. They're fundamentally broken systems that need to be replaced with corporate-style management. This is why he's not trying to win within the system. He's trying to replace the system. And this explains everything we're seeing today. They're not trying to make the government more efficient or fix democracy's problems. They are systematically destroying public trust in democratic institutions so they can replace them with corporate authoritarianism. The attacks on media, the deep state conspiracy theories, the attacks on universities and students, the attacks on civil servants, it's all part of a coordinated campaign to bring it all down so they can build their corporate monarchy on its ruins. The plan for bringing down democracy is what Yarvin calls the butterfly revolution. And to understand the butterfly revolution, we need to understand who's involved and what roles they play. It's not just a few guys with bad ideas. That alone isn't necessarily a threat to democracy. But what they've done is build a robust network that has been silently woven into every aspect of our society. Now we're going to first talk about the people involved in the U.S. government right now. The government implementation team. First, you have J.D. Vance, Vice President and Thiel's former protege, who worked at his venture capital firm Mithril Capital from 2016 to 2017. Now, he received a record-breaking $15 million donation from Thiel for his 2022 Senate race, the largest amount ever donated to a single Senate candidate. Vance has explicitly cited Curtis Yarvin's influence. This is him doing just that on the Jack Murphy Live podcast.
How do we, aside from elections, how do we rip out this leadership class? What do we do? Is it even possible to renovate or rehab these institutions from the inside? And the reason why I ask that particular angle is because, from my perspective, I've seen these institutions taken over from the ground up. It was just an adjunct professor. They had some classes, then they get tenure, then they become department head, then they're the university professor, university president. The corporations, they hire these new kids. The new kids demand the change. The change goes to HR. HR makes a policy, and then the CEOs are woke. The government official staffers, they start demanding woke from their candidates, and before you know it, it's in the halls of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Kavanaugh hearings, radical feminism, and then Joe Biden addresses the joint session of Congress and says white supremacy terror, which is just any white guy being upset at the government, is the number one domestic threat that we face. So these institutions are corrupted and rotted to the core. This elite ideology is everywhere and in all the things. What other options do we have besides voting them out, which we're seeing is ineffectual?
So I mean, I think that there are two different ideas here, right? So one is like, you know, there's this guy Curtis Yarvin who's written about some of these things, and so one is to basically accept that this entire thing is going to fall in on itself, right? And so the task of conservatives right now is to preserve as much as can be preserved, and then when the inevitable collapse of the country comes, ensure that conservatives are able to sort of help build back the country in a way that's actually better, not Joe Biden's Build Back Better, but actually some sort of reconstruction of the country.
Now, this directly echoes Yarvin's RAGE strategy, short for Retire All Government Employees.
Control insurrection. Now, we've got a fairly difficult problem up here. Is there anyone in the audience who feels that this is a bad idea, who likes the U.S. government the way it is, who doesn't want to remove it? Can I see some hands? Bueller? Oh, one over there, great. Okay, well, we'll help convince you.
Not remove, like get rid of.
Oh, shit. You're anticipating me. So, obviously, very complicated problem. So, I like to simplify things. So, I've reduced this very complicated problem to a simple 4-letter acronym, which is RAGE. And RAGE stands for Retire All Government Employees. Very, very simple.
Now, it was Thiel who brought Vance to Mar-a-Lago in 2021 to patch up his relationship with Trump, transforming Vance from calling Trump America's Hitler in 2016 to his running mate. That's why he's now vice president. Next, we have Marc Andreessen, co-founder of Andreessen Horowitz, one of Silicon Valley's most powerful venture capital firms with $46 billion in committed capital. Andreessen switched to supporting Trump in 2024, citing Biden's tech policies as the final straw. Along with partner Ben Horowitz, they donated $2.5 million each to Trump super PACs while threatening universities over DEI policies. Marc has been quietly and successfully recruiting candidates for position across Trump's administration. He considers Yarvin and Thiel friends and also invested in Yarvin's startup. Next, Michael Anton, State Department Director of Policy Planning. Anton is the originator of the Red Caesar theory, the idea that America needs an authoritarian leader to end democracy and restore order. Anton wrote, quote, "The far right is flirting with an anti-democratic ideology called Red Caesarism. Caesarism means one-man rule, halfway between monarchy and tyranny. It's supposed to end democracy while preserving smaller Republican rule," end quote. As a Project 2025 contributor and Claremont Institute senior fellow, Anton advocates for Red Caesarism as, quote, "the only redemption for democracy should woke society prevail." Anton has appeared on Curtis Yarvin's podcast and outwardly discussed how to install an American Caesar. Some additional key players include Ryan Williams, a Claremont Institute president, Thomas Klingsington, Claremont Institute board chairman, John Eastman, Claremont Institute senior fellow and legal strategist who tried to overturn the 2020 election, Jacob Hellberg, undersecretary of state and a Palantir advisor, Clark Miner, HHS chief information officer and 13-year Palantir employee, David Sachs, AI and crypto czar and PayPal co-founder with Thiel. Now, do you see the pattern? These aren't random appointments. These are strategic placements of people who either worked for Thiel's companies, advocate dark enlightenment theories, or both. And notice how many of these government officials are connected to something called the Claremont Institute. The Claremont Institute isn't just a think tank. It's the academic arm of the dark enlightenment movement, providing scholarly cover for anti-democratic theories. Here's what makes Claremont dangerous. They take extreme anti-democratic ideas and wrap them in academic language and constitutional theory. Claremont President Ryan Williams acknowledged being a founding board member of something called the Society for American Civil Renewal, which The Guardian described as an exclusive men-only fraternal order which aims to replace the U.S. government with an authoritarian-aligned regime rooted in extreme Christian nationalism and religious autocracy. But controlling the government isn't enough. You also need to control information and technology. So let's look at the tech layer of this network. First, you have Elon Musk, who controls X, formerly known as Twitter, and used to head Doge, PayPal co-founder alongside Peter Thiel. Next, you have Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, described by sources as one of the people closest to Thiel. Alex Karp, the Palantir CEO, who was appointed by Thiel. Keith Rabois, PayPal executive and co-founder who is married to Jacob Hellberg. Yes, that Jacob Hellberg, the Undersecretary of State we just talked about. Think about this. They control one of the most influential social media platforms, X, the leading AI company, OpenAI, the biggest government surveillance contractor, Palantir, and to top it off, they're in charge of government AI policy. Now, you keep hearing PayPal co-founder because this network literally grew out of PayPal. Thiel, Musk, Sachs, and Rabois all worked together in the late 90s building online payment systems. 25 years later, they're running the US government's technology policy. And Palantir, their surveillance company, just reported record revenues of $1 billion per quarter, with $10 billion in Army contracts and $30 million in ICE contracts. Their stock is up 1,700% since going public. So the same people who think democracy is bad also happen to make billions of dollars providing surveillance technology to authoritarian governments. Shocker. Now, you can't just implement anti-democratic policies without public support, so you need media influence and intellectual legitimacy. Enter Steve Bannon, who was an early political bridge and who read and promoted Yarvin's work. Eric Weinstein, who created the, quote, intellectual dark web concept, which, while working as a managing director for Thiel Capital. Ben Shapiro, Daily Wire co-founder who has also received $500,000 from Thiel. And Joe Rogan, whose platform helped popularize something known as the intellectual dark web, which is something Eric Weinstein came up with while working as managing director of Peter Thiel's investment firm in 2018. It was brilliant marketing. Take a bunch of people with massive platforms and convince their audiences that they're actually rebels fighting against a conspiracy of billionaires trying to destroy America and ensure that if victorious, they can finally say slurs on the internet again. Anyway, the early intellectual dark web positioned itself around several core talking points that would later serve as a pipeline to more extreme ideologies. They focused heavily on the campus free speech crisis, claiming universities were suppressing conservative and centrist voices, while promoting the idea that cancel culture was destroying people's careers for expressing dissenting views. Jordan Peterson's breakout issue of compelled speech around pronouns became a rallying cry alongside broader attacks on the gender ideology, identity politics, and third-wave feminism. Remember, anytime somebody tries to tell you, Hey, why can't conservatives talk on college campuses? Charlie Kirk is the largest speaker at colleges, by far. Now, the IDW presented itself as defenders of the marketplace of ideas and rational discourse against what they call woke orthodoxy, positioning themselves as reasonable centrists fighting extremism on both sides, while claiming that objective truth and the scientific method were under attack from social justice activists. This brave truth teller narrative made audiences feel like they were part of an intellectual resistance movement against mainstream groupthink, perfectly priming them to accept more radical and anti-democratic ideas. Now, you may or may not be surprised that Ben Shapiro, the conservative commentator who talks really fast and has strong opinions about WAP, has ties to all of this. It turns out his media company, The Daily Wire, received $500,000 in early funding directly from Peter Thiel. And it's no surprise Jordan Peterson is on the Daily Wire payroll. Joe Rogan, over there, little Joey, he's the biggest 5'8" podcaster in the world. He signed deals with Spotify worth $450 million total. Guess who was an early investor in Spotify? That's right, it was Peter Thiel's Founders Fund. So let's trace this, okay? Thiel funds Spotify. Spotify pays Rogan hundreds of millions. Is that a coincidence? Maybe. There's only circumstantial evidence, but it certainly can't be ruled out. However, Eric Weinstein, who is Thiel's former employee, introducing Rogan to the intellectual dark web concept was not coincidental. And now millions of Rogan listeners are getting exposed to anti-establishment ideas created by Yarvin and Thiel. Now, little Joey Rogan has entertained on his podcast Peter Thiel once, Mark Andreessen 3 times, Elon Musk 5 times, and Eric Weinstein 7 different times. Now, I want to be clear. Not everyone in this media network necessarily knows about the full anti-democratic agenda. Some of them appear to be what intelligence agencies call useful idiots. People who advance an agenda without fully understanding it. Joe Rogan probably doesn't wake up thinking, how can I help establish a corporate monarchy today? Little Joey Rogan is also at the top of this crap heap of anti-woke comedy. He has a whole extended podcast universe of sycophants that kiss his ring and push, essentially, anti-institutional messaging. Tony Hinchcliffe, Theo Vaughn, Andrew Schultz, Tim Dillon, Brian Callen, they all played a huge role in drumming up public support for Donald Trump. Now, the silver lining about this useful idiot network is most of them can honestly say they're not anti-democracy, while still advancing an anti-democracy agenda. But unfortunately, the audiences who listen will likely never bother to look into the influence and the real agenda behind their involvement in the culture war, and what they're being primed to accept. And if you're wondering, well, what happens next? Well, we don't have to guess, because they're already testing it. In El Salvador, President Bukele has implemented the full Dark Enlightenment playbook, suspending civil rights, arresting 100,000 plus people, including political opponents. He uses Palantir surveillance technology, and he built mega prison CCOT, the same prison Kilmar Abrego Garcia was sent to. We've talked about that on the show before. Curtis Yarvin explicitly praises this model. Peter Thiel's technology enables it, and they're both working to bring it to America. El Salvador is a government that publicly acknowledged they have at least 10,000 innocent prisoners. But it's okay because it's just a rounding error. This is a country where political opponents like Ernesto Moixant have been falsely accused and tortured for years. Community leaders and journalists are whisked off the streets, and anti-mining activists are charged with decades-old crimes just for standing in Bukele's way of reopening mining activity and posing huge environmental threats. This isn't theoretical authoritarianism. This is operational authoritarianism, powered by American technology and praised by American intellectuals who are now running government agencies. But why just take over existing governments when you can build a new one? Enter the network state movement, also known as the charter state movement, which is exactly as dystopian as it sounds. And if you're wondering how this will work out, well, just look at charter schools. They're They'll probably end up draining resources from regular Democratic governments while delivering worse outcomes, but with better marketing and more CEO worship. And the team behind the alternate governing movement? Well, you have Balaji Srinivasan, who is the founder of the network state theory, which he calls tech Zionism. He has a personal relationship with Curtis Yarvin and close connections to Thiel. You have Patri Friedman, who was a Seasteading Institute founder. He was a direct funding recipient from Thiel and runs Thiel-backed Pronomus Capital. You have Dryden Brown, Praxis founder with documented fascist ideologies exposed by former employees and funded by Pronomus Capital. Joe Longsdale, Palantir co-founder and one of Balaji's longtime friends. Jan Sramick, California Forever CEO, and he runs the $800 million Sonoma County City Project. These aren't just theoretical projects, okay? California Forever, like I just said, raised $800 million to build a new city in Northern California. Praxis raised $525 million for a city in the middle of the Mediterranean. The Seasteading Institute has received millions from Thiel. The network state movement has backings from dozens of billionaires. But we're draining the swamp, right? And notice the pattern. Every single one of these projects is connected to either Peter Thiel's money, Curtis Yarvin's ideology, or both. If Yarvin is the architect of the Dark Enlightenment, Balaji is the architect of network states, and Balaji has bought into exactly what Yarvin is selling. In a leaked email sent in 2013 after TechCrunch published an article exploring links between Silicon Valley tech leaders and the far-right Dark Enlightenment, Balaji tells Yarvin, quote, "If things get hot, it may be interesting to sick the Dark Enlightenment audiences on a single vulnerable hostile reporter to dox them and turn them inside out with hostile reporting sent to their advertisers, friends, and contracts." End quote. I don't want to get too into the weeds on this because we don't have a lot of time left. But we can't move on until I mention that Balaji is also a general partner at Andreessen Horowitz. Now, lastly, I really quickly want to talk about a couple specific people funding these network state projects. Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn co-founder, California Forever investor. Lauren Powell Jobs, Steve Jobs' widow, Emerson Collective and Charter Cities investor. Now, here's what's fascinating about these two. Reid Hoffman and Lauren Powell Jobs are generally considered liberal Democrats, but they're funding network city projects alongside Peter Thiel and other Dark Enlightenment figures. And this shows how the network states transcend traditional political boundaries by focusing on technocratic solutions that appeal to wealthy people, regardless of their stated politics. When you're rich enough, disrupting democracy may sound like innovation rather than authoritarianism. Okay. Whew. Take a quick breather. This has been a lot. I know. But to close us out on this topic, I'm going to give you a timeline of verified events so you can better understand how we got here. Now, the first phase of the butterfly revolution is the egg stage, which roughly took place between 2007 and 2021. Here are the key moments. 2007 to 2008, Curtis Yarvin lays out the foundational ideas of what would become the Dark Enlightenment. 2009, Yarvin coins the term red pill to describe shattering progressive illusions, adapting it from the Matrix. 2011, Peter Thiel gives $100,000 to Yarvin's startup Telon, beginning the financial backing of the Dark Enlightenment thinkers. 2012, Nick Land coins the term Dark Enlightenment and develops the philosophical framework, further adding accelerationist elements. 2016, Yarvin says he's been coaching Thiel and that Thiel is enlightened. 2019, J.D. Vance begins working for Peter Thiel. The second phase of the butterfly revolution is the caterpillar stage, which roughly took place between 2021 and January 2025. Here's the breakdown. 2021, Yarvin outlines his butterfly revolution strategy, which is legally constructing an alternate regime. 2022, Yarvin refines his rage plan, providing the blueprint for government purges. 2024, J.D. Vance becomes Trump's running mate. 2024 again, Trump and Elon announce Doge and Dark MAGA. Now, the third phase of the butterfly revolution is the pupa stage, which is what's happening now, testing the limits of their theory. January 20th, 2025, Trump's inauguration. Yarvin attends the inaugural gala as a guest of honor. January 2025, Elon Musk becomes head of Doge. Also in January 2025, Trump announces $500 billion Stargate AI project, bringing Sam Altman's OpenAI into a massive government partnership. March 2025, Musk begins illegally commandeering multiple agencies while capturing their data systems, removing thousands of employees. May 2025, Palantir secures $10 billion Army contracts and $30 million ICE deportation contracts, giving Thiel's surveillance network unprecedented government access. August 2025, Palantir reports record $1 billion quarterly revenue with 48% growth, showing massive government contract expansion. Also August 2025, whistleblowers including Daniel Bareilles and Erie Meyer warned that Musk is implementing techno-monarchism, using data systems, artificial intelligence, and advanced algorithms to manage the state, monitor citizens, and implement policies. So what's really at stake here? This isn't about traditional Republican versus Democrat politics. This isn't about old school conservatives versus liberals. This is about democracy versus authoritarianism. And the Dark Enlightenment has systematically captured the Republican Party through the MAGA movement. These people have explicitly stated they want to replace democracy with corporate monarchy. They've built a systematic network to do it. They've tested it internationally. They're in control of every branch of the United States government, and they're not going to give up that control willingly. The only question left is, what are we going to do about it? So let's look at the path forward. Look, I know this seems overwhelming. I know this sounds too ridiculous to be real. I mean, come on, a network controlling everything sounds like an impossible problem to even have, much less solve. But here's the thing. Their power depends on most people not understanding how the network works. The moment we see the connections clearly, we can start disrupting them. The moment we understand that this isn't random chaos, but systematic capture, we can start building systematic resistance. Democracy isn't self-sustaining, and right now, the people working to destroy it are the only ones working at all. These are the people systematically dismantling American democracy. Learn their names, understand their connections, and track their money, and decide what you're going to do about it, because they're counting on you doing nothing. Okay, that's all the news for today. That's our news segment. I hope everybody enjoyed what we've been doing here today. I know today is looking like a little bit of a shorter show. I do apologize for that. Next week will be a full format show. Again, I want to give shout out to technical director Chris and producer Steve. They've been working tirelessly behind the scenes to make sure the show goes up and goes smooth. Flowers to Steve as well for his script for today's episode. What did you guys think? Let us know in the comments of this video. Let us know in the comments of the full video. Just let us know what you thought of today's show. As always, I've been Jovan Bradley, and I don't have an outro. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Bye-bye.